Hey, Kyle here. In this episode of How to Eat Like a Starving Artist, I'm going to give you a very quick intro to knives. Knives are a thing where a lot of people get very obsessive or pretentious or elitist about it, but this video isn't going to focus on any of that. This is just simple, practical, a list of things to look for. With knives, the thing to keep in mind is that metal is expensive, plastic is cheap. So when you see knives like this, where there's a blade and it's just embedded in some sort of plastic, there's a good chance that the actual metal inside is quite minimal, probably only a little tab. So when you're cutting, if you're going kind of forcefully, it can actually stress and break and slip up and then gash your hand and you'll do yourself a horrible injury. They're steak knives. They are for eating with. They are for cutting up food that has already been cooked and prepared. For a step up, first of all, this is a bread knife, so you're not going to have to be putting that much stress on it. But if you look at the way it's constructed, you can actually see some of the metal blade through the handle. It stops there, and it has two little rivets holding it in place. However, as an artist, you've probably operated a tripod or built something and realized that if you want something to be really secure and really safe, 2 points isn't good enough. You need 3 points to really stabilize something and make sure it's really secure. So then you get to knives like these, where you have 3 points holding the blade into the handle. But also, if you look at this, the metal goes through the entire handle. As nice as these knives are, all this knife was one big chunk of sheet metal that they stamped a knife shape out of, slapped a handle on, sharpened, put their label on, and then sold to you, and probably sold it for too much. It's better, it's safe, but it's still not a great knife. This is the big thing that you should look for. Knives that have this little metal block here. This isn't something that was cheaply, punched out of sheet metal. This came from a much larger piece of metal that was actually ground down and shaped and put through a much more elaborate process. Knives like these are fantastic. That's the thing to look for. So they're solid, they're sharp. I find they hold their edge better, they can take a better edge. And again, you don't have to spend a lot of money, you don't have to go after a name brand. You can, I usually recommend going to a thrift store or a secondhand store, something like that. As long as it's metal, has this little metal nudge, or whatever it's called. From a safety point of view also, this is nice because if your hand is resting against this, you've got a little bit of protection. Whereas this knife here, the blade, the sharp part goes right to the edge, so as you're cutting you can actually sort of rub your finger and kind of nick yourself up a little bit. For this particular knife, I actually took a file and rounded that edge off just a little bit. With this kind of knife, you just don't have to worry about it. Again, I'm being kind of repetitive, but that's because every time you repeat something, it makes another copy of it in your brain, it becomes that much easier to remember, and this is totally worth remembering because most people eat every single day of their lives. Sometimes more than once. It's generally healthier, tastier, and so much cheaper.